everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, afternoon, wherever you are, for another webinar, Relevant Sports and Adobe Experience Platform. My name is Sammy Anderson. I am our marketing coordinator at Softcrylic. We are happy to have you. Throughout the webinar, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat, in the Q&A, whatever is not addressed in the webinar will be addressed post-webinar in either a blog or on an individual basis. So ask away whatever you have. Today we have Francis Lavelle, as well as one of our clients, near and dear, Aiden Lyons. He's the head of growth marketing at Relevant Sports. They're going to be discussing AEP and Relevant, a real-world client experience for this. If you have further questions about Softcrylic or Relevant Sports, feel free to reach out, info@softcrylic.com. And with that, I'll hand it over to Francis, and you guys can take it away.
Thanks, Sammy. Appreciate it. I'm sorry to say that I'm happy to be here, but I am disappointed. Jerry Halou, who is supposed to be moderating this Q&A with Aiden, is under the weather, and so we wish him the best. And I'll do my best to keep this moving along, and as we have a great discussion here with Aiden, who I've been lucky enough to know for many, many years. Aiden and I go way back to the early 2000s and kind of the early days of web analytics. And always one of my favorite people to catch up with. So how you doing, Aiden?
Doing good. I hope everyone's well.
Excellent. So, well, this is the third and final part of a three-part series that we've done diving into AEP, Adobe Experience Platform. The first webinar that we did was really our internal Softcrylic team doing a real deep look inside of AEP, trying to better understand capabilities around data ingestion, defining schemas, data science workspace, Adobe I/O, and really kind of trying to uncover some of the gotchas and then develop our own best practices as well. And so, and then kind of the second part was an architectural deep dive, where we are lucky enough to have Dave Bilbrough from Adobe, who leads the enterprise architecture team at Adobe, dive deeper into the architecture, really looking at, and Dave and Jerry went into a lot of the different use cases and the real world use cases that that Adobe Experience Platform helps enables customers really with the speed to market in order to consume, transform and stitch data together. And I would also highly recommend kind of going and checking out the recaps, which we've posted on our website for both those webinars. And then that brings us to today. And we wanted to give a client perspective, and having been working with Aiden in AEP, no one better to really kind of unveil some of the actual use cases of a real client and dive into what he's been able to enable leveraging AEP. And with that, Aiden, I'd love to get you to give the audience a little bit of your background, and then we can dive into what you're doing and get into some of the questions.
Sure, love to. Thank you. I actually arrived in the States about 25 years ago on a soccer scholarship, which will come back to. I understand why I tell you that in a little bit. And when I left college here in the States, I went to work for Spiegel Brands, which is a women's apparel company, and we set up the first e-commerce platform for Spiegel Brands, and we went from about 5% of overall sales and orders to 55% when I'd actually left. Those of you know the apparel industry know that it's a tough industry and the margins very slim. So after a couple of chapter 11s and every morning walking in and my colleagues not sitting beside me, I was like, I think it might be time to move on. And at the time we had just implemented Omniture, and we were working with Omniture. My Omniture rep actually said to me, he goes, the NFL are looking for people like you. And I'm like, the NFL are looking for people like me who sell women's dresses online. I'm like, I struggle to see the correlation. But he was actually correct. The NFL had decided to bring all their digital properties in-house. Before they had like a traditional NFL agreement, which is a licensing agreement to license their content out. And they were bringing in their website, bringing their clubs on board. So I did actually end up, applying for a role in the NFL and ended up working in the NFL and ended up spending 10 years there. The initial part of my years were spent in digital media. Obviously, we built out NFL and NFL Mobile. Then we added all the clubs on board. We launched the first fantasy game, grew that from like 1 million to 2 million. And then what I found kind of frustrating after about 3 or 4 years in that role was we were measuring everything on an aggregated level. Everything was about, cohorts or cookies or groups. And, with the advent of multiple devices and the growth of mobile, the growth of social, it really meant you weren't talking to your fan base in a one-to-one relationship. So I kind of got on a bookbox about we needed a bigger mixing board at the NFL to understand our customers and understand who we're marketing to, and the difference between a fan who consumes fantasy and the difference between a season ticket holder and how we market them and a shop bar. Typical NFL ended up in a working group that got together to build out an integrated database. I think I kind of got duped into interviewing a few people who I didn't really feel could do the role. So I kind of volunteered to do it and ended up running that, which became a very interesting project because, I didn't want to leave the digital space, but it actually opened up more of a digital space because what we started to show the different personas and different profiles, essentially how you need to market to them and what you need to talk to them about, when you need to talk to them, kind of opened up a whole marketing experience that we hadn't done before. And then after about 10 years, I was like, as anyone that's been in an organization for a while, I was getting itchy feet and looking for things to explore. And that's when I met Danny Silman, who's the CEO of Relevant Sports Group. And Relevant Sports Group, biggest property is the International Championship Cup, which is a soccer tournament held in the US and Asia, primarily in the period of time right before the season starts for all these big teams. We bring over the likes of Manchester United, Manchester City, Real Madrid, Barcelona, Juventus, AC Milan, Inter Milan, Arsenal, Tottenham, you name Bayern Munich, the biggest club, then we bring them over to the US and Asia. So as I'll refer back to my initial statement, my love and my first love has always been soccer or football, as we call it. So it was an opportunity I couldn't turn down based in New York. So I ended up at Relevant Sports Group and have been so for the last 3 years.
Excellent. And so then as you've gotten into Relevant, and it sounds like some of the stuff that you were doing at the NFL is kind of a precursor, homegrown type of solution that you did at the NFL. And then when you came into Relevant, you kind of started looking at technologies and kind of how you could get down to kind of that one-to-one customer communication capabilities. And, is that how you got into AEP, or can you give us a little background on that?
Well, yes, I think the first thing that I kind of realized at Relevant is now 9 years old. And initially in the early years, like 2015, 16, we would put a game on and it would sell out in 40 days. You would have 80% of the tickets sold in 40 days. Now that percentage of that pre-sale on sale period has declined over time. And the first thing I kind of noticed was that large percentage declined over time, meaning you had to do more work subsequently to sell stadiums out. And keep in mind, we will be in different stadiums with different teams in different cities every year. So it's not like you have a season ticket base. We had to acquire 80% new customers every year. While you may be in the same stadium, you may not have the two same teams. So what I started, and then you layer in the secondary ticket market. Right? There's no such thing as a sold out event anymore. You can go buy a ticket anywhere, StubHub, TM Plus. You can buy the seat you want if you're willing to pay for it. So that feeds into the factor. And then, as I mentioned earlier, like the advent of mobile and the ability to purchase late and later than ever before. I always tell this story anecdotally. I remember leaving on a Friday night before we had Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid in MetLife, and I looked at Game Time, which is an app for live events, and there were 25 events in New York the same night as our game for $50 or less to get into, and our average ticket price was $200. So what I started to realize is the dynamic of going to a live event has changed. The people who were purchasing live events have changed, and we had really no ability to stitch all this together to understand who to market to and when to market to. And a lot of our marketing was still focused on the more traditional marketing. And we weren't really speaking to the fans that wanted to buy our tickets, but had some questions, and we weren't answering those questions. So to your point, Francis, we needed something to not only bring together what those fans look like across multiple data sources, but then give us the ability to market to them in different platforms and at different times, with weighting our spend at those times to get the maximum effectiveness of that spend.
Okay, excellent. And so if I can maybe restate that a little bit, the goal of you bringing in AEP was really the ability to stitch that all of that data together and enable your business to truly kind of take that step forward in enabling your communications back to the customers, which have been changing over time and making that marketing message that much more difficult in order to drive those pre-event ticket sales.
Yeah, exactly.
So with that, I mean, where are you today, and what has been accomplished, and how are things kind of moving forward?
Things are great. Not really.
In the COVID world, it's awesome, I'm sure. Yes.
Let me talk through what we did first, and then let me talk through how we pivoted during the COVID time.
Okay.
So we built our clusters out, and what we found, clusters, personas, whatever you want to call them, what we found out was very interesting. In our early years, when we were selling 67% of the ticket sales, we were predominantly getting purchases from older Caucasians with presence of children with high share of wallet. So there were people like me who had families and, were fans of, unfortunately, I'm a fan of Newcastle United, so that's not a good example, but say I'm a fan of Manchester United, who wanted to go see Manchester United, were willing to pay for the price, were willing to pay, premium, and wanted to pay early. Like, they didn't want to wait for the discounts to come in. They're like, I want to go to this game. It's in Red Bull Arena. I want to go see it. I'm going to go pay for halfway. And they were purchasing. What has happened over time is those purchasers, as they've got older, and the demographic by which you are purchasing our tickets have got younger. And that impacts us in two ways. The younger demographic has less disposable income, however, spends a high percentage of that income on going to live events. Now, they are more price sensitive to the cost of the ticket, obviously. But like I said, they have a higher propensity to buy tickets. Now, what we found out very interesting, like I said, traditionally what we would do in the marketing sense, you'd have a launch event. The launch event would announce everything. You'd borrow the IP from all these large brands, and you would use their IP to get as much reach as you possibly could, and then you would sell your tickets. What we found out was, because the demographics had changed to a younger, 20, 25-year-old Hispanic, what we found out was they were more apt in using mobile. They were more apt in purchasing and using apps like Game Time, or just searching for tickets and buying from StubHub, whomever. They were more apt then to purchase late. They were also more savvy in the soccer world. For those who understand the soccer world, the calendar is absolutely insane. These players in top clubs are playing between 70, 80 games a year just for their clubs, and that's not adding their international games. So they were savvy enough to understand that sometimes these teams come over, and because of international commitments, don't have their best players. So the question we weren't answering in the advertising, in the paid advertising, was who was coming over and who will be playing. So what we did was we pivoted to a content strategy on the platforms that these younger demographics were on, Instagram, for example, and we would put content out that we capture from these teams, the likes of an interview with an Eden Hazard, the likes of an interview with Marcelo, with huge social followings, and we would see them retarget based upon those patterns, and we would see massive spikes in ticket sales, right? So without the stitching together knowledge of knowing what the demographic was that was buying, without the timing of knowing what the demographic was, we wouldn't be able to sell those tickets. And I would say for the Atletico Real game in MetLife, we sold something like 12 to 15,000 tickets in 10 days, which had never been done in Relevant. We were 4 weeks out. We were looking at around 25,000 tickets. We ended up selling 60,000 tickets. So the knowledge, the understanding, the ability to execute based upon the personas and the profiles we built has really helped us in the pre-coronavirus period of our life. Now, obviously, we all know where we've been for the last 10 months, and I'm sure everyone's tired of hearing about it. But essentially, what we realized is that we built that really robust profiles of the fan base that interacts and engages with all these really huge brands. And we also have touch points of what drove someone to becoming a fan and who was a pre-existing fan, or whether they had registered or not registered. And what we then went back to these clubs and said, hey, look, we understand that we may or may not have games in 2020. We didn't. We may or may have games in 2021. Please God, we do. But we can help you grow your audiences in the US because we understand who the audiences are. Because we've been doing this for 9 years. We have 9 years worth of historical purchasing data. We have 2 or 3 years really rich digital data. And then we have social data, which we can stitch together in some format. So we've gone back to the clubs and we've had 5 or 6 conversations with the clubs to say, we can help build your audience. We can help do that. And some of them have been really productive. The interesting was one of them came up with wanted to do a Hispanic History Month because they had large Hispanic players in their squad, which is funny because it brought me right back to my NFL days. I'm like, Udivia works for me and Brian, where I was like, oh, here we go again. But that kind of thing works and it resonates and then grow your audience. The other thing that we pivoted to, like most sports organizations this period of time, was we realized that we needed to keep the audience engaged, right? If we just disappeared, all the people in our database, all the people in the DMP, if we didn't engage them, they would just become useless and we might as well just close the doors. So we turned to this kind of always-on content platform with Adrian from the La Liga side of our joint venture with La Liga North America. And we kind of went from, just talking about ICC games to talking about all the teams that play in our tournaments. So that's like 5 major European leagues, and then plus the women's major European leagues. And we started going from, just talking about 1 or 2 games, talking about all the games, to weekend coverage. And we've gone from, I think, like 16 million social impressions a month up to 103, I think, in September at the peak. And we really engaged with that audience. And what we found was, obviously, we have 9 years worth of content, but that content's not going to last forever. So we kind of said, okay, we'll help the clubs grow their audience if the clubs give us content that, they may have just cut extra or may have done extra, and we're using that content to grow the audience. So the synergy is kind of there. It goes back to understanding the audience. Then we pivoted to, okay, we can help these clubs grow their audience. And if people want to understand why it's important for them to grow their audience, because essentially their European markets are saturated both from a media rights perspective and from an overall merchandising perspective, and then just pure growth. So where's the biggest media market in the world? Right here.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to recap some of that a little bit, and at the same time kind of address some questions that we've been getting in through the chat, one from Peter and one from Brian. So if I'm understanding your approach correctly, you've essentially taken AEP and you've identified your historical ticket sales data, all the customer data sources that you may have captured over the past 9 years. and then added in your rich behavioral data, which I assume comes from Adobe Analytics, and you're pulling that into the platform and able to then stitch it together and really look at how you're able to kind of, I mean, what do you do once you've stitched it together? How are you creating your profiles and your personas? And then what are you going to Brian's question, what are you going to do in the future as games come back online? And if there's some pretty innovative kind of opportunities that this opens up.
Yeah, so I think the other thing we did is we brought in a lot of third-party demographic data. We brought in survey data. I think the advice I'd give to anyone who's going down this journey is map out your matching keys and how you can stitch all your data together. Brian, who I have to thank very much for all his hard work with us, we sat down and literally before we even signed the contract and said, where are all our matching keys and how do you bring all this data together, which helped us tremendously. So to answer Brian's question, as we come out of this, we've done a lot of survey work ourselves in asking people how comfortable are they going back to stadiums. We have worked very closely with Live Nation / Ticketmaster, who are very upbeat and positive about things coming back on. And we kind of feel the audience, not to get into too depth, fall into three kind of main areas. The first area is you've got younger demographics under 25 who are dying to go back to live events. I don't really care about COVID, aren't concerned about it, and they just want to go back to their concert, to their sports game, to whatever. And that's really how they come across in answering. I'm ready, I've had enough, I'm under 25, I'm going back. Then you'll go back to the group, which I'll put myself in, which is you're a father, you have concerns, you played sports and love sports and all your life, but you're concerned about your family, you're concerned about going to a game, what's the risk, how do I do it, when do I arrive at the game, where do I park, do I have to wear a mask, is there hand sanitizer, am I allowed to use the bathrooms? So there's this middle group of people who are willing to go back to events, who aren't really concerned again about the cost, they're concerned about their safety. So in your communication with them, you really have to communicate to them, here's where you're going to park, here's the time to arrive, here's where you're going to get a seat, here's where you can dine in the stadium, here's what you need to bring, etc., and communicate all the safety procedures and protocols that have been put in place. Whereas the first group it's the price point again. Less shared wallet, they want to get to a good event for a reasonable price. The last group is they're not going to go back to any kind of live event until they get a vaccine. There's no way, there's no how, they don't care. Till there's a vaccine, till we're back to whatever the new normal is, they're not going to go in. So to answer Brian's question, in understanding those groups and what those personas look like is very important to your marketing messaging and very important to who you exclude from your marketing. Because I think exclusion is what a lost art in a lot of marketing, where we target people, but we don't exclude people. I would exclude the last bucket. I wouldn't waste my media dollars on them because they're not going to come. They're going to ruin your KPIs for your marketing metrics, and you're not going to get them. I would overspend on the younger demographic, and then the messaging for the middle demographic would be exactly as what I outlined. It's like safety protocol, what we've put in place, what the stadium's put in place. You're going to be safe. You're going to be fine. Follow these steps. You'll have a joyful experience, and we'll all be good.
Okay, excellent. So enhancing the knowledge of your customers and your customer profiles or clusters that they're falling into, you're able to really target your messaging and make better use of your ad spend. And that's during kind of the COVID time right now is kind of how you're envisioning that. And post-COVID, do you have kind of ideas as to kind of ways that let's get back to the experience platform, ways that AEP is really going to be able to help support your move forward, and once games come back online, how are you going to be able to orchestrate some of these campaigns? And let's talk a little bit about the technology and how you'd like to leverage it.
Well, I think you're kind of leading the witness there. You're touching on orchestration, which we have done a lot of testing with, and I think it's, for me, what I really start to resonate with me is I work on some other projects outside of this, is again going back to the demographics and going back to how they're comfortable to be communicated in, right? Traditionally, when we do marketing, you'll go away, do your paid media buy on social and digital. You'll do your email, you'll do your owner operated properties messaging with Target and all that. And what I've started to see across multiple verticals is, and one of the best examples I can give, I went to Best Buy to look at the TV, and they were asking you to register with either email or SMS. Now, if you ask me or you, Francis, to register with SMS, we're going to be like, no way, not in hell. But then when I think about the younger audience, they're going to be like, I actually don't even know what email is, and I don't care. So they're going to want SMS. So what has been really interesting for me and for my team is that the ability to communicate across multiple channels, either in testing, I'm going to send an email, I'm going to send a message, I'm going to send a push, and they're going to target you on site. Or I'm going to give you a chance to give a preference as to what channel you want to be communicated in. And then I'm going to put in 3 or 4 different buckets to see which is more effective. Communicating across all, communicating the channel you want, and communicating just in one channel versus multiple. Now, you can do that if you have the correct opt-ins and the correct messaging across the board. We did do a test last year where we used orchestration when you downloaded the ICC app and you walked into the stadium, because there's one thing about going to a sporting event is you can be the luckiest person in the world and having a great sporting event, meaning the actual game that you watched was amazing. Or unfortunately, sometimes you go to a sporting event and the game isn't that great. Unfortunately, for a fan, if the game isn't great, they associate that game with you and their experience, even though you have no control of it. So we felt we wanted to make the experience as best as possible, even if the game wasn't that good. So what we would do is you would get a message, push an email prior to the game of telling you, like most sports organizations do, how to get to the game, easiest way to get to the game, where parking is, all the usual stuff. However, when you then walked into the game, we geo-fenced around the stadium, and when you walked in the stadium, you got a welcome message. Welcome, Francis. Thanks for coming to Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid, blah, 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 so on and so forth, right? Then at halftime, we would message you to take part in a quiz, and the quiz would be around the 2 teams were playing, and you got the ability to win the prize. We also had prizes in during the game. You could win a match ball, which was probably, when you think about it, we just gave away a ball. And dirty secret for everyone here on the webinar, it was an actual match ball, but they didn't play with it because we had to take it away before the game. So you got an actual match ball, and the amount of love we got for giving away that match ball was insane. But we would message the people in the stadium and give away that match ball. We would then put it on social so they would change the experience. You would then do the interactive experience within the stadium about answering questions. We didn't get quite to doing it on interactive with the boards, which I know people have done, which is really cool. And then when you left the game, we would simply put a thank you message for going to the game. Nice. And then we would do a message like 4 or 5 days afterwards to follow up and show you the highlights of the game. So trying to take away from, if the game was bad, you still had a great experience. And that experience will be associated with our brand, the ICC, and then that's how we did it in stadium last year.
That's awesome. I really, in the giveaway, I think takes that raffle ticket under the seat to a whole nother level. That's pretty cool, a use case. And I agree with you 100% in that, if you're selling kind of a premium event, you really, your job as Relevant Sports is really to try to create that premium experience so that your customers do expect kind of a higher level. If they're paying $200 a ticket, that's a little bit different than going down to the corner bar and watching the live musician. So you need to have kind of that experience. I love the kind of the constant communication that you have and kind of looking at kind of that event process. So you're essentially, and back to orchestration here, you're talking about, you've got a communication strategy that, you know, starts pre-event, in event, and post-event, right? And then am I correct in believing that as this evolves for you guys, you'll also then be able to leverage kind of that rich audience data that you have to customize that communications to, you know, who you know, and now that you've got those customers stitched together, kind of how you would tailor that message.
Yeah, absolutely. Because one of the struggles you have with people who purchase tickets is, so we're going to a game, I buy 4 tickets, right? And then through whatever app, I can just send you your ticket. I don't even have to physically even give you a ticket anymore. So I get Francis's data, and I know Francis went to a game, but I don't know that Aidan went to the game. I don't know that Divya went to a game. I don't know that Brian went to the game. In fact, they all went together. But now I do know that. I know that because we recognize you when you went into the stadium. We recognize you when you're in the stadium. You either did one or two things. You either downloaded the app and registered to tell us your favorite team or who you'd be interested in tickets for, and we could stitch that together. Or if you wanted to win the ball, you had to register again. Or if you wanted to play the quiz game, again, you had to register, right? So we closed the gap on what I call the 1 in 4 syndrome. One person buys 4 tickets, you only get one set of, you know, PII. So we closed the gap on that. And you get an understanding of your really rich hardcore fan. And usually they kind of follow the same pattern. They have registered, they've given their favorite team. So it's interesting, and that does help you when you, like, we were exploring whether we should do a loyalty program.
Interesting.
Right. And the people say, well, how do you know you have a loyalty program? Like, because we know there is hardcore people out there that have interacted with us and are willing to be part of a loyalty program for these games, right? And part of the COVID thing is we set up our international soccer panel, which we use the survey to, and we have 4,500 people in this panel that we surveyed to. And we spoke to Ticketmaster and myself and Divya, and we looked at their deck and their panel was 5,000. We're like, hold on a minute, you're Ticketmaster, your panel is 5,000. We're Relevant Sports Group and our panel is 4,500. I think our panel is probably better than theirs.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I want to go back just a second. So with that, and as to the 4-in-1 problem, that's fascinating to me. And this is a little off script and maybe a bit of a difficult question, but as you are looking at kind of solving that problem, and obviously the giveaway and different games and stuff like that allow you to do that, but how do you, and how does specifically AEP help enable Relevant Sports to dive
So
into?
I'll give you an example.
How does it make it easier than more traditional methods?
Right. So when I worked at the NFL, you would have an event. You would say, let's take Super Bowl. You would go to Super Bowl for 2 weeks prior to the event starting. We would then walk around any event we had and we'd put up beacons. And then you could walk past the beacon, and based on that beacon, we could send you a triggered message, right?
Okay.
So when I went to Relevant Sports first year, we had 20 games worldwide, 11 in the US, and 9 in Asia and Europe. So, and some of them were within an hour of each other. Some of them were on the same day of each other, and across a large geographic span. So there's no way I or my team could run around every stadium in the US, and let alone then go to Singapore and do it, and put off beacons to do this kind of messaging. Within orchestration, within AEP, you can literally draw a line around the stadium for your perimeter. You have the matching key of the ID from Adobe. Once that ID walks into that perimeter, you can then trigger through orchestration, the ability to send a push notification, and your push notification sent. So on the day we had 4 or 5 games, you would literally Brian would usually go in and draw around it, and we would ask someone who was at the stadium, like, download the app and just tell us if you get the message. We drew around, we tested it in our office, we drew around our office, and everyone was getting message in the office. So that in itself was something, when we spoke to Roger Woods, I was just like, that's a game changer, because I didn't know that at the time. I just explained to Roger what the issue was. And what I'd said there is exactly what the issue was. NFL was easy. You get there 2 weeks before the event, you set everything up, you test it for a week, and you're good to go. You don't have multiple events in the same country that's, could be 6 hours apart within 2 hours of each other happening, that you want to have the same experience for New York and Francis in LA. And that was just a game changer for us. It gave us the ability to do it and have that experience across multiple stadiums at the same time, with the same experience, with the same goal of, like we said, enhancing that experience for everyone to get that rich experience at a game and associate that with our brand. That's
cool. And so then it's also just, as you've set up previously, so SMS, let's say you're sending through Adobe Campaign, you've got that set up to attribute back to, so I walked into that stadium, you've attributed that back, you're able to ingest that back into AEP, and therefore immediately kind of start stitching that together with all of the rest of the.
And the only thing we didn't get to was we only did it via push. And when I say only, those of you who work in the mobile world know that if you have 200,000 people download your app, you're going to probably get a universe of maybe 50, 60,000 on push. I found experience with the NFL and experience doing other things that SMS is for an in-venue, in-live experience, is a great form of communication, and people aren't offended by it. So we would have loved to have done both. If we had recognized you via push, if you signed up via SMS too, but we didn't get there.
Okay. Fascinating. So as you move forward, what will you be looking for in terms of future developments within AEP that you hope will help, kind of make your job more efficient and really kind of continue this, the development that you've seen today?
So I think the first thing is we have a few things that we have to get to. I don't think we fully explored all the capabilities. Definitely work with you guys has helped. I'm not doing that to give you guys a plug, but it definitely helps to have some very smart people helping you, who know the industry and know the space. What has always struck me as kind of with AEP is like, okay, you built this really cool data science platform that's plugged into all your marketing levels. That makes it really easy to bring profiles together and do it. But you're missing one key core component, right? Your good old structured relation cell database with an ETL that does all your file hygiene, that keeps all your data really clean, that then allows you to append all this on top of. You're always going to have your unknown universe and your known universe, but as people migrate over, when you do things like give away a ball and all of a sudden Francis unknown becomes known, right? For me, it would make all our lives easier. I think if it had that process, right? If it had ETL there, the file hygiene there, and everything would just sit in one place and you could stitch it together, everything really easy. I know you can upload it, I know you can bring it in, but again, all those matching keys across multiple platforms would then become unified, and it would become a lot easier. And that's why I said earlier, we had to sit down and we use SSB for our database. Here's the SSB ID, here's the Adobe ID, here's the Fish ID, here's the blah 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 blah. And we were like, where do they cross over, and where can we bring it all together? So for me personally, that would make it easier. Now I know a lot of people already have this infrastructure and data infrastructure in place, so I mean, it makes sense. But that's how I would see you would have an end-to-end solution.
That would be amazing. And I mean, I agree. I think that would make everybody's life a little bit easier. I think, somewhat selfishly, I'm glad we get to work with you in doing some of that work. So it's it's fine for us right now as consultants in the space to be able to do some of that ETL and data cleansing work. And as we kind of wrap up here, I think the kind of the journey that you've been on, throughout your career, and then especially here at Relevant Sports, has been pretty unique. I think you bring a very strong kind of technical background with a lot of marketing vision. And so as you're talking to an audience here who's maybe, exploring, AEP and other data platforms that they may be looking into, can you give us a little bit of a background into kind of your decision making and how you've been able to look at, streamlining both technology in order to achieve your marketing goals, and and how you've kind of come to those decisions? And having started with Omniture back in the day with you, I know a little bit about this journey, but I'm very interested in hear what advice you could give to our audience today.
So that's a really good question. Here's my feeling is data is only as valuable as to how you can execute upon it. So if you have a lot of data and rich data and it sits somewhere in a silo and you can't do anything with it, then it's not valuable. For me, I do have a strong technical background. I do have a data background, but that's not the fun part. The fun part is when you identify someone in a persona is of an age group and that you market to them later in a cycle, and you're actually risking your job because your CEO is saying, why haven't we sold that Atletico versus Real? I'm like, just wait. And I'm sitting in our ticketing war room with Vivian Branch, absolutely shitting my pants because we haven't sold the game out. And then all of a sudden you have an absolute explosion of ticket sales. There would be no good having that knowledge on a deck and walking into the office and saying, hey, everyone, look at this. This is great. The ability to make that data actionable, the ability to action upon it, and the ability to do that across multiple channels is priceless. So the thing I think you people need to understand is not every platform, not every tool is perfect. And I always struggle this with the NFL. We'd always get some new developer, someone new would come in and they'd want to bring in the latest this and latest that. I'm like, yeah, but it's not connected. It doesn't help me. It's just going to break the pipeline. So I personally feel there's more value in an ecosystem which is connected, which allows you to execute your marketing and execute and test in a really quick and seamless fashion. So if you're going to fail, you can fail very early and change. Lucky enough for us, we didn't fail and it worked. Yeah, but I'm not going to say everything we did work. There was a couple of things that didn't work. So I guess we did fail. So you need to place your bet on what you're comfortable with, but you need to understand that if you have multiple products and multiple silos that don't speak to each other, in the instant gratification world we live in, if you can't execute against that, you're going to struggle. So what AEP presented to me was that ecosystem. Was an ecosystem that is connected, was an ecosystem that had a unified ID, was an ecosystem that I could pivot or we could pivot really quickly on. And that was what the beauty for me was. Now, is it wholly perfect? No. Are there some other things out there that probably could rival it or are kind of as good? Probably, but you need to understand what your goals are and how you can execute those goals. And then your evaluation process, think, what are the pros and cons? For me, having built a version of AEP at the NFL, and then I've struggled with some of the matching keys. For me, this is like, okay, I'm doing a digital transformation for this company. This is perfect. It's going to save me cost. It's going to save me a lot of work. So it was the all-in-one ecosystem.
Excellent. All right. And with that, I think we've come to about the time. Anything else you wanted to add in closing there, Aidan? It's been an awesome conversation.
No,
Great
glad
to-
to have it. I hope everyone learned something for it. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and I hope everyone stays safe and well in this fun time.
Yes, and we wish Jerry the best. So
Yes.
and we will be back in the new year with additional webinars, and look forward to seeing all of you then. Thanks for attending, and if you have any questions, please reach out to myself or anybody on our team. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Bye.